Many people who come in don't really know what they're doing.
No.
This is a learning place.
You know, sometimes, I was thinking about that, we like, if we do a show that has kids in it, well, Gypsy's an example. We needed a few kids and little boy dancers, but we needed, just even in the very beginning, there's a scene where kids are auditioning for this vaudeville production. So, we kind of said, well, we have more kids than we need, but what I think we're going to have a principle that we'll just use kids whose parents are also in it. And that got some guys to be, because we also needed men to be like the manager, the stage manager of the vaudeville house that was producing it. So you can get whole families to do shows. I mean, like I don't know. Do You Remember there was a lot of families in that. Do You Remember was our sesquicentennial production. That was actually early 90s. But we probably started planning for it about 89.
We all took 50 years.
Yeah, we did.
And we all
broke it into 50-year
a
segments.
50-year act, and then we directed the 50-year
Yep,
act.
and that had people in it from about age 4 to 84. I don't know.
And we had a horse on stage,
Right.
remember? We had the horse on stage.
Yes, so
We had, when I did Guys and
A
Dolls
live
in
horse on
85,
stage.
the whole Woodworth family got involved, because Liz was one of the hot box girls.
oh yeah.
And I needed someone to sing. I didn't have anyone who would accept the role of Arva. I didn't have that beautiful tenor solo. And so Liz said, well, why don't we ask my dad? And so Frank came, and he said, sure, I'll play the role. And so Frank was in it, and then one night Josie showed up. She said, well, I figured, you know, the rest of the family's in the show, I might as well be. So she
was in
was
the Salvation
in,
Army Band, right?
what's that?
Right,
I think she was in the
Salvation
Salvation Army
Salvation
Band.
Army Band.
Yep.
Right.
And so she said, well, I figured the other two people were, I might as well be in it. So it was fun, and it also created a good place to go for after rehearsal parties.
Yes.
The Woodworth
They had a
household.
swimming pool.
Yes, that's kind of nice, yeah.
I used to babysit for Woodworth's when they lived through my backyard.
Okay.
And I remember over there babysitting, and they were out with Van Herent's, and they all came back to Woodworth's. And one of the kids was kind of fussy, and Marilyn said, and she's rocking this baby, singing lullabies, and I thought I heard angels. I mean, it was, I thought, wow, it was so impressive.
Guys and Dolls was a wonderful show, and there are certain scenes you always remember, like the scene that in Plaza Suite, the don't rock the boat.
Sit down, you're rocking the boat.
With Jim McMillan.
Oh, that was
That was so great.
And John Kraft.
And John
John
Kraft.
Kraft was in
in
the
the
80s
85.
version,
Jim
yeah.
McMillan played that role.
Yes.
And they did it a
Yeah,
couple
John
of years
Kraft,
ago.
yeah, all
And
that.
I did try to have Jim here tonight because he was involved in a lot of
Oh,
shows.
yeah.
He was.
So I'm going to try to recruit him for the 90s, but
He was my husband too.
He and I were dance partners a couple times, so
Because he
we
was in
graduated
South
from high school
Pacific,
together.
he was in Guys and Dolls.
Yeah,
I-
very
so
talented.
I'm just talking about the ones that I directed.
Can I tell this story on
Funny thing happened.
on camera? Like, thinking about this, how hot it was the summer you did, South Pacific. Thank you, good memory. And it wasn't air conditioned. And one of the scenes, I was shaped a little differently then. I was younger, and we did it in like swimsuit, like a swimsuit top and shorts, and all the women that were in the Navy. And so there was a scene where we had to be in like frozen in this Vesuvian position like this. And Jim was my dance partner, so he's standing with his face like over my shoulder. And as we're standing there smiling for the audience, his sweat was dripping off his chin on my shoulder. And we had to change then from this like, bare-legged swimsuit-looking thing back into pantyhose. And I'm sorry if you've never worn pantyhose. To put them on hot sweatiness, that was challenging.
Right.
Well, it was the South Pacific in the theater building.
It was,
Yeah.
yes, it was
So this
very
is authentic.
appropriate.
Except for Sam, and Sam wore, what was his role? He was some officer, and he had a long sleeve shirt with cufflinks.
Yes.
And everything was pressed, and he was the only one who wasn't perspiring.
Sheldon,
Okay,
he was
fine.
always-
Oh, Sam Sheldon, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
sure he was a
Yeah.
professional
Yeah.
non-perspirer. Oh my gosh, I forgot he was in that
One
one.
of the things I remember about South Pacific is I was way over on the stage right side, and there was a couple of things about that show. Number one was, we had to have the windows open.
Mhm.
And
Fresh air.
also, we didn't start the show till 8 o'clock.
Right.
We had
That's right.
no draperies on the windows.
Oh, no.
So when they turned the lights on, you hardly could tell. So we would do scene changes, that were supposed to be blackouts.
Yeah.
And, you could see everything. And we just kind of thought, well, maybe we should
We'll just pretend.
we'll just pretend, or maybe we'll close our eyes when we're doing But anyway, one of the times I was way over in stage right, and Jim and I, that's where we first met. And we connected really well, and we were really good at living with each other. I mean, we had all of our lines for the show down, but then we had a whole set of ad-lib lines that we were doing quietly to each other.
Yes, make sure that that's clear. that
Right.
It wasn't like everybody was hearing it, but it was
No,
the
but it was
two of
just
you
when we were
interacting in the scene.
We did
interacting.
like the peas and carrots, peas and carrots.
Right.
You were
Yeah, and
actually
we were
saying
talking,
stuff.
but we had actual lines.
Well, you have to.
We had
That's
our
the
own,
rule.
we had our own script that we had developed. So we're over there, talking like, what are they doing, and just kind of looking at and then I heard one of my students down on the sidewalk down below saying, what's Mr. Lutz doing up there in that building with a sailor hat on? Because I could see
See,
through
they
the
were
windows.
outside.
They were on the sidewalk, walking past.
Oh, fun.
And so I never broke character.
I'm in a show.
Shout out the window, but all the pictures, all the guys, their backs are just wet.
Wet.
Yeah.
Because
Oh,
we never changed costumes, we just had the same ones, but there were some days it was really hot, and there were also times when it was quiet, but it wasn't quiet because you could hear the hum of the fans.
oh, yeah.
Because
Yeah,
everybody
that's
brought
right.
their box fans, we had them
Mhm.
all lined up in the back and up in the balcony, and so it was just,
The mosquito netting.
And
We
mosquito
had gotten air conditioning by the next summer, which was Gypsy, and we were still trying to save money. 'Cause
We're always
Oh,
trying
yeah.
to say.
Yes, we was Poe, like we couldn't afford the R. So Marilyn Van Heeren played Mama Rose, is it Rose? And she's up there on stage in the spotlight. We're getting along pretty far enough that we're in full costume. So she's up there on stage in the spotlight singing, Mama's gonna na 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 na. And just like, it was about 90 bazillion degrees because we weren't using air conditioning during rehearsals because, it was just us.
Only during
We were
performance.
saving it for
Yes,
the
I love
performances.
that.
Yeah.
And Terry Schmidt, who was the president of the board at the time, she came in to watch a rehearsal or something. She's standing back there and she goes, that woman should not have to endure this heat
Right.
with a mink stole on. Turn on the air conditioning. And the rest of us were so glad.
there was another part to that, is that during that winter, I think, Arlene Wiedenheft made the curtains for the building.
Oh, the black,
Yeah.
blackout
Yeah.
The
curtains.
curtains, the velvets that are there now.
Yeah.
What year
Oh,
again?
for the
This would have
windows.
been,
Yeah.
let's see, it would have been like the winter of '84.
Okay.
Mhm, mhm.
And she made them in the basement. We got all, she was a
She was a
wonderful,
family artist.
oh,
Yes.
wonderful. She had her own
Family
business, and she made them all in the basement, laid out all the fabric on the floor, on the tables.
Curtains that we have to this
Curtains
day.
that we have to this day that are there.
Those kind of maroon
Right,
or
right.
malt.
Yeah, I was thinking
And
that.
then
Yeah.
while-
Yes.
Yeah.
Real
while
heavyweight to
we
cover
were
the blackout.
rehearsing, we were putting them up.
Oh.
Yeah.
So we
Yes.
were rehearsing on stage for Gypsy, and we were putting them, and Arlene was up on the top of the
Oh, I
scaffold.
remember that.
Way up, she crawled way up, and then we put them all, and I don't know if they've ever been taken down. Maybe for painting one time, but otherwise they've been up there all the
Real
years.
challenge because they were arched.
And they were arched, right?
And then she also, I don't know if it was before or after, made these nice
Those
theatrical
ribbon
banners.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
They're
that
nice.
was Summer of Annie,
Yeah.
Was
because,
it that when we had a dedication or something?
right, we
Yeah.
dedicated, Michael Belanchi read a poem.
That's right.
Gina and John Kraft sang a song from Sunday in the Park with George, Move On.
Mhm.
It was a whole experience, and the
was.
banners,
Mm.
Michael, I think, wrote the poem to go with the banners, so it was all one big production, and that was the Summer of Annie. Because I can remember they had to carry a piano down behind the building so they could sing the song outside.
Outside, yeah.
Right.
Another evidence, as we're talking, I'm sure it's very apparent that the discovery of talents of all different kinds, all of the arts, comes to rest
Right.
at the theater. And one of the best things that happened to community theater in the 80s was the Lutzes coming to town.
Oh, that was nice.
Yes.
Nice
Some
of you to
good
say.
quality directing.
They
yeah, and
contributed
building and,
so much since then, but the 80s,
We were
Diane,
very
you
involved, right?
directed a lot of shows, and Patrick, I took over the supervision of the building and all the improvements of the building, which was a huge job. And so, so we're always looking for qualified directors, and this was a real blessing for us to have them come to us.
And another parallel, we need people today to help here in this
Right,
building.
Yes.
right.
And-
We still have a lot of little jobs to do.
Again, there's
and,
just a whole range of stuff. There's office work, there's
Even more.
there's artistic stuff, there's, and it, as it gets, I was talking about all the stuff we did by hand, well, now it gets more technical, so even if your main thing is that you're I use this term with great affection, computer nerd, we could, there's the lights and sound are all like
Yeah.
computerized
you need
now.
that background.
But back then, I mean, like, I don't know, I think it probably was more in the 70s, I thought it'd be very cool to work on lights, and, so it was just like a mechanical follow spot, and at the end of the 80s, or 70s, we were still hauling stuff around and plugging it all in, and you had to learn the layout of a whole new building every
Right.
time, and wonder if
Yeah.
you had places to safely hang the
Yeah,
lights.
I was gonna mention, you should tell us about stage 2, because you initiated that during the 80s.
Right,
That was so cool.
that was, stage 2, we said, why don't, we could be doing other things, because back then it was just the 3, spring, summer, and
Mhm.
fall, and there were, downtime, times on the calendar, and so we thought if we do something small, and, limited run, limited expense, it would be fun to get people into the theater more often. And so, we did some things, we called it stage 2, which meant you didn't conduct it like one of our main stage productions. You said, I want to do this, and hey, do you want to be in this? So you didn't have auditions,
Yeah.
you just got the people together and you put together, for example, I did Mass Appeal.
Yes.
Patrick and John Otten, which has a lot of funny
Small
stories,
cast.
a small cast, for many reasons, whether how it was received in the community or how it's difficult for both Patrick and John to learn lines. Barb and I, his wife, Barb Otten, we used to joke because we knew the lines better. And there was one scene where you had to hurry up and go backstage and put this, I don't know what it's called, a priest's robe on, but for some reason you
Yeah,
couldn't
there
get-
was a lining in it, and if I would put my arm in it a certain way, it would get stuck in the lining, so I'd come out and look like I had a black arm and head. So I would practice over and over and over, and putting it on, putting it on,
And
putting
Barb
it
would
on,
be back
back
there.
there, and she was my dresser and helped me. And I think half the time, still my arm got, I had to go back on, I had to kind of hide that arm because I was doing a sermon. Yeah,
And at one point, Barb and I were working backstage, and they were way off, and I said to Barb, just ring the phone.
So then there was a scene then where we were like, John had to answer it.
But it was Mass Appeal, and we did it a couple of performances.
Mass Appeal, the female version. You and Barb could do it.
Yeah. Well, the funniest story is that Paczynski's asked us to do it for their Catholic church in Watauga.
Watauga,
And so
right.
they said, well, come out, stay at our place, on some lake, and so Patrick and John were gonna do, I'm sorry if I laugh, a rapid run-through of lines.
Is that like an oxymoron?
Yes.
It was like 2.5 hours.
And John and I weren't speaking to each other by the time we
Oh.
finished.
Not that you're angry.
No,
I think
we were
you're
just so,
thoroughly
just
exhausted.
exhausted.
Oh.
right?
That was just one of them, and other people joined in on the whole concept of stage 2, and I'd kind of like to do this, and we were talking earlier, we had an evening of, we call it acts and snacks, and we did 3 one-act plays, 3 different directors, and then we decided, I said, well, why don't we have refreshments in between while we're getting ready for the next one, and so we chose refreshments that went along with the play that they had just seen. And Rudy helped with that, Rudy Gaitan helped with that, and I was telling folks, one of them took place in a prison, and Rudy said, well, bread and water, I suppose, but we might not get people interested in that, but I think that one took place in Texas, so we had Texas sheet cake, and I don't remember what went along with the other shows, but it was fun, and it got people into the theater building, it got some people involved who didn't know if they could commit to a full-length
Yes.
production, or that they had
That was kind
the
of the mission,
talent,
was
it?
to do
Yeah.
that. or they wanted to test their directing wings.
Or experiment
That was
with
the-
something.
Right.
different.
That you think,
Yeah.
well, not everybody's gonna want to come see this, but, yeah, it was a fun thing, and we still have things like
A
that.
little bit like Judy's show this summer.
Right.
Yeah, I think it must have been, because it was after Backstage on Spring Street, I think, that we had, what we called the Friends of PDQ Bach, which was
Oh,
a
yes,
similar
I
kind of
had
thing.
more.
We were like
Bach.
ambassadors of the theater, and we were in various times. We could do it from anywhere with 4 of us to about 16 if we were all there. And we usually sang a cappella. PDQ Bach is actually a, Peter Schickele has this imaginary character of PDQ Bach, was the youngest, like, no good son of Johann Sebastian Bach. But so he sings funny stuff. And so we were a comedy singing group, and we sang for church lady luncheons, we sang for, like the Elks Club, the whatever. I remember one time singing where they had us up at the front of a banquet, and so we were straight across, which means you can't see each other for visual cues much. And part of the reason we were a cappella is because we didn't necessarily have a phone. We didn't necessarily have
Thank you.
a piano.
Brilliant.
We didn't necessarily have a piano. So we just, get a pitch pipe, but we couldn't hear each other. And I remember having to say, if you want to hear us sing, you're going to have to stop talking and clanking your glasses. But the other thing is we did funny stuff because we didn't have a commitment to have to rehearse and get really good. And if you're funny and you make a mistake, we actually had this shtick that we'd go like, we'd start out badly and miss our entrance and go, oh, let's just run over that again and throw it down and stomp on it and then sing some more. So, but we got paid, I don't know, something like $75 or $50 in the 80s, and then that just went into the theater.
And that evolved into what we call take notes.
Then they became take note
On-call
after
players.
we moved to
On-call.
Madison.
On-call
Yeah.
players.
Were you
Yes.
on-call players ever with us?
No,
Okay.
no, I wasn't. But when you were talking about that little boy missing his cue.
Oh, yeah.
When you directed Black Friday, Vera Collada and I were the maids.
Oh, yes, you're
And
right.
we're playing Trivial Pursuit downstairs.
Oh.
And we're having so much fun. And all of a sudden, Jane Lord leans between us and she says, shouldn't you ladies be somewhere? Oh my gosh. We ran up those stairs. I grabbed her tray, she grabbed my tray. We went out on stage and we are just, our bosoms are heaving. I'm standing in her spot, she's standing in my spot, and the whole cast just kind of looking over to see what was going
Sort of like the play noises off, we're talking
Right.
about all the things
Right, I
happening.
know.
Oh, yeah.
I remember Vera was a checkout at Century Foods. And I said, I remember going through her line and, getting checked out, and I said, you really have kind of a fun voice. I said, you should try out for a community theater production.
Oh, my
And I
gosh.
think that was Black Friday.
I think it was.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think it
So-
was. Oh, we had fun.
One of the funny stories about the on-call players is we would do things for service organizations, and we performed out at Old Hickory quite a few times. We put this little show together because many times we just kind of, Diane would many times write things just for a specific group, but then we put together a kind of a old-time radio show
Oh, yes.
that we performed at a lot of different places in Dodge County.
Well, and as far away as Slinger, remember?
Remember, yeah, we went
To
to Slinger.
the, whatever that restaurant is that looks out over a lake, it's famous, everybody, it's, a lot of people know it, but it's kind of a nice restaurant.
So one of the nights, it was kind of cold and rainy and icy, and it was snowing and everything. So I had a full-size pickup truck at that time, so where everything would be thrown into the back. But it was really windy that night, so we had music stands and we had a lot of props. And Jim Greiner, who did so many great things for us over the years, he also helped us as well as he was the sound person. So we made all these prop sound things, marching things and a wind machine and all this stuff. And so we're late and we have to hurry up and drive out to Old Hickory. So we get out to
Near the memorial, the
Veterans
Memorial by the
Memorial.
cemetery. by
And
Oakwood.
all of a sudden, I look in the rearview mirror, I'm driving along, and Jim and Diane are riding with me, and the rest of the cast is already out there waiting for us to bring all this stuff. And I look in my rearview mirror, and I'm seeing sparks coming from underneath the car that was right
My
behind
God.
us.
Oh,
And I thought, oh my God, what happened? So we pull over, and the car pulls over. One of our music stands had flown out of the back of the truck, wedged underneath this car.
Oh,
So we're pulled over, and with all this stuff, and so we helped the man pull it out, and it was in about 3 different parts. And Jim and I were like, what do we do with it? And so I said, well, I wonder where this came from. Threw it in the back of the truck, and we all just took off.
Oh my
my
goodness.
Where
goodness.
did this come from?
Deny.
So we had a good laugh that night, and
Yeah.
plenty of drinks to follow as well. So.
Go ahead.
no, that's all right.
I was just gonna say, did somebody say something about there being a live horse on stage?
Oh,
We just
yeah.
lost it,
Right.
right?
Do you remember?
A live horse?
A live horse.
How does
That
Kids
was
are leaving.
early 90s, right?
Right.
Yeah, that
Oh.
was, yeah.
On the next chapter,
On the
right?
next-
Yeah.
Decade by decade.
We also had a full-size Henry Ford Model T on
Right.
stage.
Oh, is that right?
Oh,
Well, that
and
doesn't require
That was in the 90s.
cleanup.
That's coming up. So
That's
that's-
coming up.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
When
Another
Annette,
little teaser.
when Annette directed Bye Bye Birdie, the first show,
Oh,
I said, she had a motorcycle come down the aisle
Yeah.
of the theater at the show house. It was amazing.
Unbelievable.
It was just amazing.
We got away with a lot of things we probably would not have gotten
Yeah.
away with.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that would fly in here.
Can I tell a couple more stories about the old building?
Yes,
All right.
yes.
Two to tell. One, we were talking about the ticket boards, and I hope we still have one of those, because it was great to have it in
I
our
think there
museum.
might be one in
There's
the
just
Yeah.
canvas and they have little
Right.
couches.
Little
Uh-huh.
couches for everything. But when we moved into the new building, we had church pews. Nothing
Yeah.
on them, they were just solid wooden
Wood.
church pews, wood church pews. But we didn't have any numbers or, rows or anything, and so we thought, well, how are we gonna figure this out? So we thought, well, let's get like 4 people from the cast and have them sit in all the different pews. And then we put masking tape. We had that for several years, masking tape that, was like seat 1, 2, 3 in the different rows. Well, what happened though is that they were somewhat small,
The people.
the people that were asked to
Yes.
sit. So our first opening night was like, 5 people can't fit here, only 4 can fit. So, but we had sold the tickets, so we had to have a few nights, so we had to have folding chairs right on the end, which we
No.
could never do now because of fire
No fire,
regulations. But
yeah.
we made it work, and then we had to go back and redo the ticket boards. But, so that was a little problem, but the good thing is we were sold out just about every night.
Yeah.
People were so excited about us moving into our new building. The whole community was so excited about this. And Ronnie probably remembers, sometimes we would rehearse the dances outside in front of the building, just so people, when they were driving
Oh.
by, would see something's going on there. And we had a hand-painted sign that we put out front every night, coming soon.
Now rehearsing.
Now rehearsing, and so
Well,
we did
also
that.
there was fresh air outside.
It's fresh air. So hot.
And no bats.
But as we were,
Or they
the
stayed up
the
higher.
other story is that when we were rehearsing, we sold the pipe organ. And we thought we were gonna get all this money for the pipe organ. It was beautiful, it had a huge keyboard. And at first we thought maybe we should keep it, we could play music before, but we didn't have the room on the stage. So it filled up this huge space that now we call the garage, and up above is the loft that we used for many years for the orchestra. And so we advertised in this church newspaper. There wasn't the internet or anything, and there was a church newspaper that went all over the country, and so we put it in there, and we thought this is gonna be sold in no time. No offers whatsoever. So a church from Columbus did come over, and they said, we'll give you $100 for it. So we thought, well, okay. So they had a young seminarian student leading the charge, and they have the small church in Columbus, and they came over, and they were so excited. They were taking it apart, and they had trailers, and they were hauling it out, and
We were rehearsing
we
at
were
the same
rehearsing
time.
at the same time, South Pacific. And, I was kind of, working with them and saying, yeah, you got a really nice crew, and they're doing a super job. And the next night, they came back, and he, waved me over, and I walked over, and he said, we probably should have labeled everything and took some pictures of what we were taking apart.
No.
So we later found out they never got it back together, and it also had to be in a tuned space that was exactly the same shape as what we had
Oh.
So it was built to fit that spot, and it's
Yeah.
tuned for that spot.
Wow.
So that was an interesting story.
Probably could have gotten that just for the brass.
We,
I don't know.
yeah, we probably, in the big picture, we probably
So-
given it to them.
This makes me think of another funny story about dance rehearsals. Eventually, we got mirrors in the basement. I think Marianne Miller sold us her mirrors when she closed Miller Academy. But anyway, of dance. But so it had a nice wooden floor, except was it ever paved underneath? I don't know. Anyway, when they eventually tore it up,
Yeah.
it was just like dirt. So there's a wood floor and then dirt underneath. So it was humid. And it had a couple of fairly
Oh, yeah.
significant heaves in it. And I don't know if you can get this on tape. So just imagine if you're gonna go shuffle off to Buffalo, you'd have to like don't trip on this heave. Because there were big heaves in the wooden
Right.
floor that you had
And
to
along with
dance
that,
around.
we needed money, so we rented the basement for a number of years, the Swinging Beavers,
Oh, yeah.
square
Oh my
dancers.
gosh, yeah.
And they would complain all the time about these heats.
Yeah.
You know, most of the, in the dead of winter when we had the heat on, it was perfect and
Mhm.
they loved it. And then in the spring, you know, we'd have these huge.
Yeah, in the summer when we did musicals
Yeah.
and needed to dance.
Right.
You
Right.
fixed that though, Patrick.
Well,
didn't
what
you
we
do that
did
for?
is, we had to tear out that floor, and we thought it was dirt, but it was actually the pieces underneath supporting the floor had disintegrated
Oh,
because it had gotten wet so many times.
Mhm.
Because of course, our theater's on Spring Street, which means there
there
are
was a
springs,
spring, yeah.
including one underneath this building, there's a spring.
Yes.
That's still flowing, and so we ended up tearing all that out. What a mess that was, getting all that flooring
Oh
out.
my gosh.
And then they poured 4 inches of concrete on top of the original, and then it was tiled, and it was great today.
Well, it's great depending on your, if you're wearing
What
tap
time-
shoes
what
on
time
a
of the
tile
year? Yeah.
floor,
Right.
not so fun.
Yeah.
But you know, you got tap shoes on tile or you got heaves on wood, so one or the other.
The other thing with an old building, all the bats that were
Right,
showing
Oh,
lots of
yes.
that.
during performances, and you'd get all the little ladies in, and they take their programs and they put them up over their head, and they scooch down in their seat. And of course, the actors have to be right up
Yeah.
on stage, pretty. I mean, these bats aren't even there.
Yes.
I remember one incident when this lady was doing that.
Oh, I hate bats.
We
I'm
were in the
terrified.
basement, meeting or cleaning or something, and there was a bat, and Tina, she just about.
I'm paralyzed, paralyzed with
She
fear.
just,
Paralyzed
Yeah,
with
bats are
fear
really
about
important,
bats.
but I don't like sharing my living space with them. you
I know.
There are a lot of them in that building. and
Yes,
so
there
it's
are.
great, right?
And I remember sitting in the balcony once, this would have been probably the 90s because I was just back to see a show after I moved to Madison, but I happened to notice that it caught my eye, a bat came out from the hole in the ceiling where the ceiling fans connected
Right.
and started flying around, and John Landeck and Jim, it must have been a funny thing happened on the way to
It
the
was
forum.
Scott Thompson, because John Landeck came back and he was so angry. Upstaged by a bat.
Yeah, there were these, yeah, so it was like this really touching song, and there's these two guys on opposite sides
The father
of the
and
stage,
son.
and this bat swooping around them, and so it's kind of hard, you know, sort of a moving song with the bat.
but our audience is commendable because they never left it
No.
not mass because there
No.
was a bat in the
Yeah.
house.
I
So-
remember I was
APT.
decorating the set for a show, and I dragged a rug out of the baptismal font, wherever all that stuff was kept, and I'm unrolling it.
Mhm.
There's a bat.
Oh, yeah, there was a
Yeah.
bat.
Dead?
Yeah, but you know what, it still scares me.
There,
I-
there,
yeah.
well, I have a low startle threshold. There were rats in the Wisconsin theater. Not, I never saw a live one, but we did.
Yeah, we never had
encounter a
rats,
couple
but-
We
dead
just
ones.
saw the evidence of the shoes
Yeah,
and so on.
yeah, that was a creepy.
I wanted to kind of get back to our discussion about the outreach that we did in the 80s with On-Call and the singing group and so on.
I remember a fundraiser, and it was like a carnival. And I
Tell
remember
us
that.
Dr.
That's what I was going to say.
Samadani read poems.
Mhm, mhm.
And I had never had my palm read.
Oh,
And he read my palm and he closed it up, and he told me, he said, you have had 5 children and 3 are, you know, he knew I had a miscarriage with 2 of them, which, and he wasn't my doctor, and I had, but I was absolutely blown away. I couldn't believe
Those
that.
were fun, we had them
I think it was
on.
during Beaver Fest, wasn't it?
something like
Is there-
that.
Oh, yeah, I
Yeah.
think you're right.
That same weekend.
Because
Well,
we
we
had a
had a lot.
lawn behind
Right.
the
Yeah.
church.
And
the
before the
Baptist church.
garage
But
was there.
the Telltale is the one
Right,
that
it was the
started.
Telltale that
the
started it,
carnival.
right.
Yeah.
I remember doing face painting.
Yeah.
We
all
used to be
kinds
able
of
to
things.
do, like a gathering before gala or whatever, before like opening night, there'd be food and things
How
like
that
that
started
outside.
was, we never could seem to get people to come to opening night.
Yeah.
People would say, oh, I'll wait for the review,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and we were always disappointed because we know the shows were good, come right away. So what happened was Cheryl Thompson, who got involved,
And Pat,
and Pat, yeah,
I always think of her as
Pat Rundy, but Cheryl came up with this idea, let's have a gala on opening night. And we made a connection with Beaver Dam Hospital, a lady named Mary Kraft.
Oh,
And she was in charge of the food service at the time and made fantastic hors d'oeuvres. And they would deliver it all,
Yep.
and we'd have, and that really helped getting people there. And then we decided, with that success, we would have something outside at intermission, and we set up a tent every night. So that was a whole nother crew, because it was so hot in the building, even with the air conditioning, that we'd have everybody come outside, and we had beverages for people. And what we had to have I think I was in charge of that one for Annie. We had to set up this tent and go to McDonald's and pick up this orange drink.
the
Yeah.
orange
This big
drinks.
thing of
Oh,
orange
yeah.
drink. Right, right.
And I think also we did it for 1940s Radio Hour because some people came in costume
Mhm.
or dressed in the 40s.
Right.
What year was that, Diane?
The Radio Hour,
That was in
1940s. Oh, that was into the 90s.
Yeah.
That was a great show too.
Yeah, that could be done again because people
It
love
could be,
big
yeah,
rooms.
it's a
Yeah.
very good and clever
Yeah.
show. But I was gonna talk a little bit more about Telltale, because that started
Oh,
in the
yeah,
early
absolutely.
80s too.
Right.
Yeah, we,
And that was a division, we called it a division of the community theater that gave an opportunity for children to put on shows. Before that, however, kind of connected to it, another outreach program was adults did
yes, I was,
shows and traveled to schools, not only in Beaver Dam, but the larger surrounding area. And I'll get back to Telltale, but it occurred to me too that I wanted to say that was probably possible more when women were at home more and that both parents weren't
someone,
working
is
so
it like
much.
Jane Triller did some of those?
Yeah,
But
Jim
then,
McMillan,
for example,
was
Jim
nice.
McMillan,
or
Yeah.
different work schedules.
Right.
But that was a really good representation too of the
Absolutely.
theater, always giving to
You
the
know.
community.
Mhm.
But in terms of the Telltale Children's Theater, that started in the early 80s and just kept on building. So we'd have 100 children on stage. There's so much.
Yeah, in the 80s, it would be like, you know, the sort of thing that you might do in your backyard with the neighborhood kids almost. They had some rehearsals in the afternoon, and then they would have sort of a little cardboard cutout for their backdrop, and then the play cost 50 cents or something like that. And now it's, I mean, oh my goodness, it's a huge full-scale
And the
production.
philosophy, I was going to say, the philosophy always was that we would cast all children.
Yeah.
So we have a large stage, but that's even a challenge now.
Right.
Yeah.
And I was gonna say, and then Diane, with being the drama coach at high school, you know, you had wonderful talent coming in that, I think that helped your program, which in
Yeah.
turn helped the adult program at the theater. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like basketball in Randolph. You start them out young.
Yeah. I still
It
remember
is true.
watching Ryan Belangi as a tiny little boy down in the
Yes.
basement of the theater, the theater building, and I thought, I don't think he had any lines. I think it was all just reacting.
Yeah.
And of course, you know,
I don't know, what does he do now?
what's that?
What does he do now?
Well, he's a famous opera singer, and he
He's very
teaches
famous opera
voice, and he's traveled all over the world.
Oh
Yeah, it's
my
fabulous.
goodness.
He lives
Well,
in Chicago.
in Pippin, who was the little boy in Pippin? Who is
Ben
now?
Stelflug.
Yeah, Ben Stelflew was the
Right.
little boy in Pippin.
Yeah, you're right, Tina, where they started things out in Telltale, and then when they were in high school, and my high school students were really involved in theater,
Yes.
either when they were in high school or when they were in college and they came back, and
And we've kind of referred to, not that the people who are involved in theater are pointed toward a career,
right.
but we've had a good number of young people who have gone on to theater or theater-related careers, and they got their basic education with the high school and with the community theater. So we're really proud of that. In fact, we've had a couple of roots and wings shows that kind of feature, because there are a number of young people who become professionals.
Including Jeremy King.
And
Well, I just, I went to Bayfield, which is the first time I've been up to the Superior Shore, and got to check in with Liz Woodward. And of course, you've been working with her sometimes up there professionally, but so Liz Woodward introduced me to the bartender where we met for a drink as Roni was my first choreographer when and she was Baby June in Gypsy. But now Liz is like the major mover and
Oh,
shaker
yes.
of Stage North in Bayfield, which is very artsy.
I call her the queen of Bayfield.
Yes,
Yeah, right.
It's not
She
just
really-
Stage North, it's everything.
Yes,
I'm
yeah,
sure
the
they're
Big
gonna-
Top
She has
Chautauqua
that
and all that,
personality.
and she was Baby June. So, you know, I am a moo cow, that kind of thing, so it's a silly little song, so they really, I remember one time, somebody, Jim McMillan, who was able to do some of the shows, the daytime shows in the schools because he worked second shift. He works at he's worked for, I don't know, 30 years at Kraft Foods. We were hoping Jim would be here tonight, so I'm gonna speak for him a smidge. We were classmates in high school, but anyway, he's an example of something somebody else said once in a summer show, like, what I like about hanging out in community theater, working in community theater, is like, where else does a farm kid get to rub elbows with the doctors or something like that? So you have, you know, if you think about socioeconomic class or whatever, you've got people that are doctors and lawyers painting the floor, and people that work nights in the factory having the lead role in a show maybe. And
What I liked about theater is it's like a 2-month commitment of
Yes.
your life.
Yep.
You come in, you're involved in the show, you meet wonderful creative friends, and then boom, the show's over, and you may not come back for a year or 2 years or whatever, but then you come back and boom, it's another 2-month commitment, and you meet different new friends
Yeah.
with,
Right.
you know, more talent. And the other thing that has really struck me is when we were Beaver Dam Community Theater, and we morphed into Beaver Dam Area Community, the talent that we are
Right.
drawing from other communities.
Absolutely.
And we can learn from that talent. I learned a lot from you when you directed me, and I was your assistant from high school.
High school?
And I learned an awful lot from watching and listening to you. John Otten taught me a lot, and Annette. I think between those, you three, I have learned so much, and I have applied that to my directing, and I've applied that to my acting on stage. And I still hear little snippets in the back of my head, you know, and
Yeah.
you're all there.
And we're so lucky to have, again, just sort of the way that people have different talents. Like Lois Lievenhagen, who's now kind of a minor celebrity for doing for years of doing the costumes for Mike LaCrone. She worked on costumes for Andy, she's worked on costumes and various things, but I'm thinking back to days like Lois, it wasn't,
Lola Mader.
Lola Mader.
Mader.
Yes,
Lola
in
Mader.
fact, I was
And-
hoping
and-
she would come
Yeah.
tonight,
Yeah.
but she's in her 90s.
Oh my goodness. Well, and Mary Grisham was, I don't know, she was so much of a
Mary Grisham?
seamstress as an organizer, but people with just organizational skills. And so like we've had people that are seamstresses who just do these fabulous creations and give us their time. Us is all of us. I mean, give time and you just couldn't do it. It wouldn't be the same quality without the people that are doing that stuff. It's
My mom came to see me in a show once, and she sat next to somebody I know, and I can't even remember who I had this conversation with. But I think they were talking about me, and then started talking about people in general having talent. And this woman said to me, "Your mother told me something that I thought was so profound." I thought, "Oh, sweet Jesus." She said, "Your mother said, everybody is given a talent. And it's your responsibility to find your talent and to share it with the world."
That's right.
And it's our responsibility to help them develop those
yeah,
talents.
I love, as a choreographer, I have just loved working with what I call like diamonds in the rough. When I choreographed, oh shoot, now I'm forgetting the name of it, Kim directed it, and it was Pirates of Penzance, there we go. When I choreographed Pirates of Penzance, for which I commuted from Madison to Beaver Dam because I wanted to work with Kim so bad. But, so we had, you need a lot of men in that show, and men are hard to come by in theater. So we had a full bunch of policemen and then another full bunch of pirates. And most of them had never danced at all before. And I'm sorry, I have to keep saying it. So I was getting them to do this thing where they're going like, come and plow the field, and like lead with the hip. Like, Patrick, can you even lead with the hip yet? I mean, I don't know.
No.
And they were like, oh, this is so silly. I feel so wussy doing this. And I like, promise me, I promise you, it will be great. So by the time they had it worked up enough to come and actually rehearse, instead of moving in the basement, because you got to make good use of people's time. So you'd have blocking upstairs and then dancing in the basement or singing off in another room somewhere. So when they finally started putting the show together in order and the pirates are doing this dance, like the prop girls and everybody would drop what they were doing and run and watch that scene because it was so cool. And it got standing ovations in the middle of the show a couple of times. The middle of the show, the audience roars to applause for that particular dance number. But those guys barely knew their right from their left foot. But they worked hard. And also you got to design it for what they can do. But so then they became dancers and they got to go around like, yeah, I danced, I got standing O.
Yeah,
And
a variety of